OneWebDay events. These are happening all around the globe, everywhere from Tunisia, Melbourne, Copenhagen, Bangalore. I mean, it's everywhere. It's been growing extensively in its 3 years of existence, which is pretty amazing. I'm Sasha Meinrath, and I'm the research director at the Wireless Future program. I work with this gentleman right here, Michael Calabrese, and right over here, Victor Picard as well, and in the back, Ben Lennett. And we wanted to host this event for many reasons, one of which is that we've been involved, many of us, in technology and policy and the intersection thereof for many years. And this is an up-and-coming event in many ways that sort of highlights the import of, I think, one of the most important telecommunications developments in the history of humankind. This notion of anyone being able to connect with anyone else or any information, etc. It's a very powerful model. It's a very powerful ideal to hold. And I want to especially thank Nathan James. Where is he? Over there. And Morgan Wieland, who's right back there. They're responsible for coordinating the DC event that we're seeing here today and really pulling this together and doing a huge amount of behind-the-scenes logistical work in terms of especially the Time Capsule project and a lot of other work here. Thank you so much for bringing this all together and making this happen. I also wanted to thank the rest of the New America staff who pulled this together and made this work. We are also streaming live video online right now that's going out around the globe. And we are also going to be archiving this and putting it on the OneWebDay page for other people to look at. And it should be a lot of fun. I think perhaps the most important thanks of the day goes to Susan Crawford. She came up with this notion of having a OneWebDay to rival Earth Day. In the 3 short years of its existence, it's grown substantially and is now being celebrated in scores of locations around the globe. I've been involved, I guess, since before the beginning in OneWebDay. It sort of harkens back to a lot of the work that I was doing in media organizing in a field of indie media and on my work with the QN Foundation, creating low-cost infrastructure for spreading connectivity. And, you know, back, I guess it would have been, 3-4 years ago, I remember very specifically a meeting with Susan in a dark corner of a dark bar and hoisting pints and contemplating what this might look like in the future. And I think, you know, she has worked tirelessly to bring this about, and I'm very thankful to now be hosting my 3rd OneWebDay event and also to be hosting only one of so many more OneWebDay events. I think, you know, when we think about auspicious days, right, in the same way that Earth Day sort of was a precursor to the environmental movement and what's now become a mainstream, exceedingly important issue. OneWebDay may be in its infancy, but we can see where this is going. We can see the import of the telecommunications and policy arena gaining in priority in the campaigns for president, in the campaigns of various and sundry officials running for all sorts of offices, in the decision-making at the very local levels amongst politicians and decision-makers in local communities. And here at New America, we are in some ways celebrating this auspicious day and focusing more and more on technology. We've just agreed to launch the Open Technology Initiative, which I will be helping coordinate. It's sort of a think tank of technologists to really drive home the importance of looking at technology in a digital era. I think, you know, when we talk about what we're doing here, we're really focusing on policy assessment, and we're focusing on analysis, and we're focusing on supporting telecommunications technologies and infrastructures to really meet the needs of people around the globe. And OneWebDay really focuses on this notion of we must spread connectivity, we must spread affordable connectivity, we must create infrastructures that are themselves liberatory and helpful to the communities that they serve. So without too much further ado, I will turn this over to our group of distinguished speakers. I think it's really incredible, the people that we have here, and I think to get things started, and perhaps lay a tone for what we are going to be talking about today. I can think of no one better to be here than Commissioner Jonathan Adelstein, who helps makes the decisions of what happens at the national level, at the highest level, what's going on with our infrastructure and with our telecommunications and with the web itself. And he will speak, I'm sure, of some of the battles that are being waged, but also the import of OneWebDay and these telecommunications technologies for all of us. So please welcome Commissioner Jonathan Adelstein.
I'm on the fly, got to make a little change. I'm sorry in the schedule here. Congresswoman Donna Edwards is here, and she's got to be somewhere, but she is just such a breath of fresh air in Washington. I'm so glad you're representing that district and representing the public interest as you do. You've been involved in this issue from long before you were in Congress, somebody who deeply understands the importance of the internet freedom, its relationship to media democracy, the need to stop media consolidation and make the media look more like America. You've been on every one of these issues a leader, and I would be honored to listen to you before I go, because I know you are under a time constraint, and I want to hear every word you have to say. So if I could allow Congresswoman Donna Edwards to go first. Thank you for being here.
Hello, good morning, and thank you, Commissioner. I mean, I feel like I have followed you on this issue for quite some time, and I think it's really tremendous that we have an advocate in government on the Commission, really an advocate for democracy and for democratizing the Internet. I first came to this issue in a couple of different ways. One, I had been the executive director of the ARCA Foundation, and our small little family foundation decided that we wanted to put resources, along with some others in philanthropy, into pushing this idea that that democracy requires lots of communication from various sources and resources, and that shouldn't be constrained. And it shouldn't be constrained by government. And we saw at that time the beauty of the internet for people in communities that hadn't always had a voice, and somehow the internet has enabled them to have that voice. And now we're in an environment in which we are very challenged, because some have seen the great commercial potential of the internet and have wanted to exploit that, and that's fine and fair game, but not when it really constrains participation. And the other direction from which I come on many of these issues is because I live in my community out in Fort Washington, Maryland, and in my community, which is not very far from Washington, D.C., our broadband service provider says that we have broadband access in my zip code. And it turns out that that's only sort of true. But it's actually not true on my street. In fact, it's not true for 2 houses on my street, but it is true for the rest of the homes. And the reason is because the pipelines don't quite go to my house. But the service provider is able to say, we cover the entire zip code. And so I know that in my community, I still have dial-up access. And let me just tell you, it's actually been probably months since I've even used the internet at home, because it's just too much of a pain. It's too cumbersome. It takes a long time. All of the the data, the information that I really most want is it's just too heavy to handle on dial-up. And I'm not alone. There's an elementary school down the street from me. Young people who really should be engaged on the internet for information, for resources, for research, and they can't be because they live in an old school that has old wiring and is not really equipped to handle today's technology. And this is true not just for urban and suburban communities, but for rural communities as well, and across the certainly across this country and around the world. And I think that the internet and the access to the web is the future for the 21st century. And I connect that very closely to what that means for the education of our young people. And if we have young people coming out of the schools in my congressional district who don't have the capacity to engage in the kind of research and information sharing and content production that others do around the country, they will be left farther and farther behind. And so I want to get to an environment where we're not talking about, any kind of a digital divide or a broadband divide, but those words are like bunny ears. Although I have to admit to you, I still have some of those in my house too. And I understand that I got to change that soon. But we are in an environment in which the transitions are really, really fast. They're speeding up every single day, and so the more communities we have that are not really sort of fully engaged in a full capacity in this new technological environment, then the farther and farther behind they will fall. And so my interest in this is as someone who wants to have greater access at home. I mean, I want to be able, now I got this new job, and I want to be able to be at home at night and occasionally have access to broadband so I can keep working all day, every day. But I can't. And that's a challenge. And I think that, and we have to have, I think about what being engaged online has meant for me as a community participant, but also has meant for me as a candidate for elective office. I mean, in my campaign, we were able to actually engage thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the country who were interested in this little race out in the 4th Congressional District in Maryland, because they could be engaged and because they could participate in democracy in a way that they hadn't before, even though they didn't really necessarily live in the neighborhood. And I think that this is a really great environment for democracy and for expanding our ability to have broad public policy discussions in a way with folks that we wouldn't necessarily come in contact with otherwise, and sharing viewpoints that we wouldn't necessarily come in contact with if we were simply going to the old libraries as we knew them with books only, or if we were even engaged in our communities. I look at the internet as an organizing tool. I know in my own community before I came into the Congress, it's how we organized our neighbors and our neighborhood associations around issues of concern to us, whether it was about the local roads projects or a light or a stop sign or what was happening in the zoning and planning process. We organized ourselves largely online because many of us are very busy. We're going from our jobs to the soccer games to all kinds of things, and we're spending a lot of time, obviously, driving, doing that. But it means that our time is limited, and so if we can expand our participation in our communities by using the internet as a resource and a tool to do that, then we can increase participation in lots of ways. I mean, I've had the great fortune of being able to participate in lots of conversations online that are both, using both our telephones and using the internet simultaneously. I mean, and for our young people, this is all, pretty much old hat for them. I think about my son, who's now 20, and he's a junior in college, and I know when I was in college, my parents would be hard-pressed to get a letter from me because it would mean that I'd have to sit down. First I'd have to find the paper, and then I'd have to sit down and I'd write it, and then I've got to, find a stamp and put it in the mail. And so my son doesn't write letters either, at least in the old way. But he might be sitting in class, and, and I've sent him a text message just to find out, are you still out there? And he can just text back, okay, I am. And that's about it. And that's a different way of communicating. The other day I had the experience of being on the House floor, and I was making an argument about D.C. Gun restrictions that were being imposed by the House. And I was listening to the debate on the other side, and unbeknownst to me, of course, I was being shown on camera. And my son apparently had gathered a number of his friends in their dorm room, and they were watching C-SPAN. And I feel this buzz on my hip, and I pull out my BlackBerry, and he says, "Mom, stop looking so bored. And I smiled at the, at the time, and sat up straight and tried to look very, very attentive. But that is the miracle of communications as we know them today. And so I feel very grateful to have been, sort of buoyed on by him and his friends in his dorm room. Imagine they're sitting around watching C-SPAN. You got to wonder about that anyway. But they were, and so I got the great benefit of that and used the technology at the same time. And so we are really in an amazing time of tremendous transition. And there's a role for government. There's a role for government to actually set down the rules in place that say to us that this is a public good, that what we have here is a public good, and that we should maximize that public good, but not by constraining access. I mean, if I want to know what's going on the environment around the world, I think that the Sierra Clubs of the world and the League of Conservation Voters and the World Wildlife Federation and all of them should be able to find me wherever I am, and they shouldn't have to go any circuitous route to do that. Nobody should have to pay for me to be able to, or I shouldn't have to pay to be able to have access to that kind of information, even if it's only a small slice of our communities that want that information. I shouldn't have to be sold a product in order to find it either. And so I think that we are in a challenging environment in which, a lot of us recognize the great, sort of value of this wonderful technology, and we want to be able to exploit, and I say that word in a healthy way, this tool as much as possible. But it's important for us to have a framework that enables the broadest possible access and doesn't constrain participation, and to view this as a valuable tool both for democracy but also as a valuable tool for the broadest possible communication, and for people wherever they are and at whatever place they are on the income scale to have access to this resource. And so we have the challenge of both ensuring that the infrastructure is stable and that it supports the widest possible use, and also enabling our commercial sector to get the great advantages that there are through the use of in using the internet and expanding broadband, but not constraining those of us who are both users and providers. And I know I view myself as a user and a provider. And I may not provide as much as other people provide, but there are occasions when I do, and I should have the ability to perform those dual roles. So I'm excited about the prospects for the future, but I'm also wary, and I know that our advocacy community and our regulatory system has to be able to accommodate all of the different uses that are out there for the internet and with the expansion of broadband, but we have to do it in a way that is inclusive of all of our communities. So I thank you very much for gathering here today, and I'm excited to be able to work with you. And I've had another hat on for years as more of an advocate and a nudger and needler, and I intend to continue to play that role in the United States Congress. And so thank you all again, and I appreciate your accommodation for my schedule. I never thought in, many a day that I'd have to make accommodations for my schedule, but these days I do. And so thank you again, Commissioner. Thank you so much for your leadership and your voice, because it is really important that we have voices on the inside who are advocating for citizens and consumers and for the right thing to happen with this very, very valuable tool. Thank you very much.
I remember thinking when I first heard that Congresswoman Edwards was running for office, I was so disappointed because my house in Greenbelt was just right outside of your district, and I really wanted you to represent me. So I'm so glad that you came. Thank you so much. And without further ado, another fantastic leader who's shown remarkable insight and vision, Commissioner Jonathan Adelstein.
Well, I'm sure glad we let her go first, because listening to those words was inspiring. As always, she gets it, but she's lived it. I mean, this is somebody that we really need to have in Congress representing the interests of Americans, real Americans that struggle with these issues. So I'm glad she's there, and thank you for that kind introduction, belatedly, and a second time around as well. And thanks to New America Foundation and everybody here. We have such an eloquent and powerful group of people that really understand these issues here today in Washington. You know, I know the big events in New York, but in Washington we got some serious star power here, people who have really been advocates and leaders in this fight to keep the internet open, to make sure it's available to everyone. Of course, this brainchild of Susan Crawford really brings needed focus on the importance of the internet and online participation. It's a tool for such incredible educational opportunities, political participation, online activism, and we're seeing it now like never before. We're just beginning to see the fruition of what we've worked on for so many years to make the internet open and free and available, and there's so much more that we can do. It's certainly a solution to vastly increase government transparency. We're going to hear more about that from our panelists. We haven't even begun to maximize those opportunities. Seems to be taking stock of where we are today is a little like taking a still picture of a speeding bullet. It's kind of hard to imagine that 40 years have passed since the transmission of, for the first time, from ARPANET to between UCLA and the Stanford Research Institute. It's been almost 20 years since Sir Tim Berners-Lee first proposed the World Wide Web. I was there the other day at the announcement about his World Wide Web Foundation, which he announced at the museum, which is really exciting. He got a $5 million grant from the Knight Foundation to begin pointing the way toward maximizing the future of the internet from the very source that began it all. So thanks to Sir Tim, here we are. We have an estimated 178 million U.S. adults who are actively using the web. Over 100 million websites operated worldwide. By some estimates, there's 30 billion pages on the web. And the consumers download 100 million files every day, and they upload hundreds of thousands of new videos every day. So we're seeing creativity up. We're seeing people getting new information down. And with all this is going on, this level of excitement, 80% of the planet has yet to tap the internet. So we're going to need to level that out if we truly want to promote the spread of freedom and democracy around the world and the free flow of information, which we hold as our sacred birthright here in America, enshrined in the First Amendment, but we have so far to go around the world. And clearly our progress will be measured on a global scale. So I'm glad that while we celebrate here in D.C., there's events in New York, of course, in Chicago, and other places around the country, but also around the world, in India and Serbia, Australia, Ukraine, among so many other places. I think I'd like to focus on the importance of setting policy that fosters the best aspects of the internet, and that will help restore our country to global leadership position, which we deserve. We've always been the global leaders in technology. That's how we've managed to maintain our economic prowess, and yet now we're seeing that slip. Clearly, we need a national broadband strategy to restore our place as the leader around the world. Broadband has the power to revolutionize everything about how we live, work, participate, involve ourselves in the economy and commerce. So it's a great infrastructure challenge of today. You think about the election of 2008, not to get political because this isn't, but every one of the big issues that we're talking about, you know, broadband isn't at the top of anybody's list. It's on the list, higher on some campaigns than others. But all the big issues that we're talking about, be it healthcare, the economy in particular. I mean, look at productivity and global competition and outsourcing. We have this huge economic challenge, and the way that we're going to find our way out of it is going to be through technology and through technological development, through having broadband to every place in this country, in order to be able to have a long-term ability to compete around the globe. I mentioned healthcare. We have telemedicine, e-records, home monitoring. We're worried about healthcare costs, but what are we doing about it? I mean, this is an issue that's been on the agenda since I can remember. When I first got to the Hill in '87, I found a dusty old book about healthcare crisis and cost. It was dated 1973. here's something that can actually make a difference. We have educational opportunities through distance learning and access to museums and libraries and all the sources of information all over the internet that with my kid I can instantly get anything he wants to know. We can find out right away. I don't think it's dumbing us down, as that article in the Atlantic said. I think it opens new opportunities if it's used right. We've got to tap broadband to meet our public safety needs through interoperable networks and emergency alerts. And of course, it touches the big issue of energy and the environment through telecommuting and smart electrical grids. And it has, of course, what we're talking about today, the power to transform democracy itself. Tools for political expression, citizen journalists and commentators, instant responses to local events, statewide events, national events, international events. So it may not be the top solution for any of these issues, but certainly broadband is critical to the future of every one of them. So we've got to make sure that it reaches everyone, no matter where they live, no matter what the color of their skin, their economic opportunities, what part of the country they live in. So we've made progress, of course, and people talk about how much progress we've made, but my gosh, we have so many challenges ahead of us. And we see consistent research showing that people with low income, seniors, minorities, and those in rural area trail behind in internet access. And that's simply unacceptable if we're going to reach our full potential, both economically, socially, and culturally in this country. We've got challenges in adoption and competition and speed and affordability. You know the stats. The ITU says we're 15th in broadband penetration. Contrary to some views, I think that broadband penetration does matter. We need to tap all of our resources. Now, it's slower and more expensive here in the United States than in countries that we compete with internationally. Add it all up, according to the ITIF's composite ranking of penetration, speed, and price, and the U.S. ranks a lowly 15th in that scale as well. So the data tells us consistently something's wrong. We can debate what the numbers are, but the bottom line is that even if the U.S. were number one, we should be doing everything we can to stay on top because technology is evolving. And we're not number one, and that's where we belong. We've got to make this a higher priority than it is today. We need a national broadband strategy. We need it now. There's no doubt the private sector is going to do the heaviest lifting, but there is a role for government. The market alone is not going to reach the optimal level of investment. And as Donna said so eloquently, we need to make sure that everyone benefits from this array of services and opportunities the internet brings. And of course, we need to keep up with our global competitors. And we absolutely must protect internet freedom. Now, a lot of the elements of a national broadband strategy have been put on the table. I've got a stack of reports on my desk. And it's not that simple to develop a strategy, but it requires more leadership to actually implement one than we've seen thus far. We've seen benign neglect for the last 8 years, saying, don't worry, the market will take care of it. Well, the market's not taking care of it. It'll take leadership on all levels of government, from top to bottom, at the federal, state, and local levels, tribal levels, coordinated, and it'll require broad participation from the diverse community of users. We truly need to all work together if this is going to really succeed. Now, a key element of that strategy is making sure that the open and interconnected nature of the internet is protected. One big reason we see such active political activity online is that the internet was founded on the principle of openness and neutrality. Consumers have been able to access the content of their choice, run applications they want, attach their choice of devices. And we've seen the empowerment. We have citizen journalists springing up, even as we see the national media focusing on issues that are clearly ancillary to the needs of the American people. We find that people can take the media into their own hands through broadband. And entrepreneurs are taking it into their own hands, and artists. It fosters collaboration, whether through wikis or social networks, like we've never seen. So the very beauty of this is nobody's in charge and everybody's in charge. It's something that we need to preserve. I found that the movement for internet freedom is tapping that same spirit that fueled the movement against media consolidation. In an age when traditional media markets are dominated by a handful of giant conglomerates, I have a lot of optimism about broadband. I think we all sense that it is the way that we're going to get beyond this, back to a sense of decentralized, locally rooted, and entrepreneurial voices that really reflect the media landscape at its best in America before the massive consolidation that we've seen. Now, this summer at the FCC, you all know we issued a landmark order. For the first time, we made clear, though by a very narrow majority, that we'll enforce federal law and the principles behind the Commission's Internet Policy Statement. I think we need to adopt rules, and we could use legislation to address concerns about network discrimination. The Commission's decision is really a key step to make sure that consumers will continue to enjoy freedom on the internet and to send a message that we on the FCC are serious about this. By adopting this case-by-case approach, the FCC gave ourselves a degree of flexibility that I think is helpful, but also means that using that approach, your attention and vigilance are more important than ever to keep us on top of what's happening. This problem was brought to our attention by others, and if there's other problems, we need you to bring it to our attention as well. We need to have the grassroots support of so many consumers and consumer advocates like those of you here today to make sure that we continue to have such successful outcomes. So let's use today's celebration as a call to action, to promote openness, to promote interoperability, to foster affordable access, and to protect those elements of the internet that have created such value and opened so many doors for so many people. I'm confident that working together we can achieve that goal, especially with the caliber of people that we have here today. And I thank you all for your involvement, your leadership, and for making me a part of this important event today on the future of the internet.
Thank you, Commissioner Adelstein. And thank you for helping set the agenda here. I think you've touched on a number of incredibly important points, not the least of which being that although we talk about internet connectivity as fairly ubiquitous, and I hope we'll get a little bit more into what that means in the United States, that 80% of humanity still has yet to ever get online. That's a really important point to keep in our minds as we move forward with things. Thank you so much. So moving on, I think, it's great to learn from those that have come before us. And Ellen Miller has a 30-year history of being a veteran advocate fighting for transparency and political funding in the United States and for our politicians, basically to ensure that there is some modicum of understanding of where the money comes from when people run for office. She's also will be announced in the next issue of Wired magazine as one of the 15 people that the next president of the United States should talk with. So it's out now. Great. On your newsstands now. But luckily we have her here, and so we get to glean from her knowledge and expertise right now. So please welcome Ellen Miller.
Good morning. I am Ellen Miller, co-founder and executive director of the Sunlight Foundation, and I am more than delighted to be with you this morning to celebrate the internet on OneWebDay. The Sunlight Foundation was founded in 2006, January of 2006, with the nonpartisan mission of using the revolutionary power of the internet to make information about Congress and the federal government more meaningfully accessible to citizens. Through our projects and our own grant-making, Sunlight serves as a catalyst for greater political transparency and fosters more openness and accountability in government. Our ultimate goal is to strengthen the relationship between citizens and elected officials and to foster public trust in Congress. Technology and the power of the internet are at the very core of every single one of our efforts. Susan Crawford had a brilliant insight in founding OneWebDay. It's important not to take this medium for granted, and it's also important to recognize a new chapter in democratic participation powered by the web. It's interesting to me, as our communications director, Gabriella Schneider, remarked on the way over, that in New York they have a rally and we talk policy in Washington. Right. I'm torn. I'd kind of like to be with Susan and the gang in New York. But I'm delighted to be here today because this is where our heart is. Thanks to the internet, citizens are shaping a new culture characterized by active engagement in the democratic process, fueled by the online technologies. The web is opening up new channels of communication, new ways of participating in governance, and in oversight. The internet technologies are breaking down barriers and empowering all of us to make our voice heard, to engage in a conversation, to build new communities, connect with friends, and strengthen our political engagement. In this new world, all of us can be a publisher, an activist, and organizer, and we all are. No longer are we isolated, passive consumers of political information. Instead, we're active players who blog, who tweet, who post videos on YouTube, and Yammer, that is my latest and our latest in our office. All of this helps internal communication and helps shape public opinion and discourse. I've even lobbied a member of Congress on Twitter and actually had some success with it. The internet bolsters our ability to connect with each other, to share our knowledge, collaborate, and organize across geographical, ideological, and even partisan lines. Databases and mashups and other technologies create the potential for seeing anything from the performance of a sports team to the happenings on a single city block where you live, with a depth and context previously unimaginable. Our government stands to gain from all the ways this new communication empowers participants in our democracy. First, public scrutiny, once the exclusive domain of the press, is being reinforced by cadres of citizens and bloggers demanding digital access to government proceedings and data, and then offering analysis and policy expertise. Second, new tools show the promise of efficient and effective government, better able to manage information, analyze it, and respond to it. Finally, a government open to a networked citizenry creates opportunities for increased civic engagement, offsetting the privileged influence and access once and only accorded to special interests. At Sunlight, we're trying to extend the reach of the web into government, starting by shedding more light on Congress. We are open sourcing government data so that it can be reused by citizens in ways that no one's ever imagined before. We've liberated gigabytes of important political data from basements, from paper, from PDFs, and other non-searchable and non-mashable formats. We've assembled and funded an array of web-based databases and tools about members of Congress, their staff, legislation, federal spending, and lobbyists. These tools are used by bloggers, journalists, and citizens every single day to oversee the work of our elected officials and enforce accountability. And while government itself has been slow to adapt to this new digital information age, the network world hasn't waited. Technologists, hobbyists, bloggers, NGOs around the world, and concerned citizens have leveraged the web to free government information from those basements and unwieldy websites, to lobby government to make more information available, to scrutinize government data and ask hard questions, or formulate alternative policies, and to act as watchdogs on everything from congressional earmarks to the administration's firing of 8 U.S. attorney generals. We are now only starting to see the potential of technology to boost government transparency and open government in federal agencies. Realizing its full potential promises to create a new balance between citizens and government. The next administration, whichever one it is, working with Congress, can ensure that the federal government takes the necessary steps to become a responsive, open, and effective as increasingly networked Americans expect it to be. Citizens can join Sunlight's efforts and those of our colleagues to help with this work in a variety of ways. We've launched numerous initiatives in which thousands of citizens have participated. One example is a site called publicmarkup.org, where initially citizens helped to draft a bill on government transparency. But if you go there today, as of 9:30 this morning, you will find the Wall Street bailout bill posted with opportunities to comment on every single section. We'll be pushing this out this afternoon, but I certainly invite everyone to go to that site and tell us what you think about this piece of legislation. Or you can participate in the Open House Project, which is a collaborative online effort to trying to find ways to bring the House of Representatives into the 21st century in its use of technology. Later this week, we'll be launching the Open Senate Project, an identical project, but focusing on the Senate's use of technology to better provide information to citizens about its work. Another popular effort is Capital Words, which identifies the single most frequently spoken word on Capitol Hill that day. A single word. And if you want to know on a daily basis what's happening in Congress, think opencongress.org or Congresspedia, a wiki that focuses just on members and issues in Congress. I'm honored to be part of Washington's celebration of OneWebDay and to know that we are just one small part of celebrating the power of the Internet that's happening all around the globe. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'll turn it over now to our next speaker. You may not know Democracy in Action, but chances are if you've petitioned somebody, you've used their technologies. We have John Wheeler here. He's the managing director for Democracy in Action, and he's also has extensive political leadership. He's worked on political leadership training as well as been on the Hill, I'm so sorry, and has experience there as well. So please welcome John. He'll speak a little bit about what Democracy in Action does and the import of that work to civil democracy.
Thank you. As mentioned, I started my my career in political technology working on the Hill. Started up there in 1994, so was actually the first staff person, because I was the technology guy, to have an email address and to have Internet Explorer and other tools that were just coming out in 94, 95. And remember talking to our staff about, I've got this great thing, I've got an email address and I can get to the internet, and pretty much the reaction was, why on earth would I want that? My phones are ringing off the hook, my voicemail box is totally filled up. I don't want another way for people to send me information. And I have more information than I can possibly deal with that, I need to read and I need to keep on top of, so why would I want this? I understand how to use Legis, the text-based service. I don't want to learn how to use a web-based thing. It's a bit different now. But the idea of information flooding in is definitely gotten even more difficult for congressional staff and congresspeople to deal with. I am proud to be part of that flood of information that's hitting them. So Democracy in Action, just quickly about ourselves, we're a nonprofit, progressive political organization that only works with progressive political groups. And if you can switch to the next slide. What we provide is online organizing tools. So that's really a way for groups to very easily put up on their website a sign-up page for people who are interested in the issues that the groups work on, to say, yes, I want to learn more about what you do, I want to receive email messages from you. And a lot of those email messages will then contain links or ways for people to take action. So it's signing a petition, it's signing on or adapting a letter that the organization puts up to then send to that particular individual's member of Congress. Or it's making a donation to support the work of the organization. If you go to the next tool, the next slide. These are some of the groups that we work with. And Congresswoman Edwards mentioned that she hears a lot from and wants to hear a lot from groups, and she mentioned a few groups that everyone has probably heard of, the Sierra Club and the like. One reason we were founded was because back in 2003, when we were getting started, those were the only groups that could really afford to use the tools that were out there. There were a few commercial vendors that provided these tools. So if you were a Sierra Club, sure, you could put together a very effective online advocacy campaign, but you couldn't if you were the Archdiocesan Housing Authority, for example. So we realized that using a lot of open source tools that were out there for the tech geeks building on top of a lamp stack, we could really build something that was a lot less expensive. And working as a nonprofit, we could provide the tools to other nonprofits to use. So these are some of the over 800 organizations that we now work with on both our nonprofit side, and we also have a political side that works with Democratic and progressive campaigns. So what have these groups done with our tools? Let's go to the next slide. One example is an organization called Step It Up, which back in 2007 was just a very small student-run organization that wanted to call attention to the issue around climate change. So they used our distributed events tools, they used our email blasting tool to organize over 1,400 climate change events in 50 states, rallies around the country. And building off of that movement, now the people who started Step It Up have continued in the progressive movement, founding something called the One Sky Campaign and 350.org to continue to call attention to global climate change and become one of the many organizations that are out there advocating on that issue, but doing it in a slightly different way than some of the larger groups might be doing. Next slide, please. Moms Rising, another one of our shining stars. They were founded by Joan Blades, who had founded Move On, and kind of came to Moms Rising with much of the strategy that Move On had used, but none of their deep pockets or huge, enormous list, and was able to then grow her list to about 140,000 people in just 18 months, using some of these viral email blasts, tell a friend, and then taking that list of 140,000 people and using them to, and using the tools that we can help provide to do things like get family medical leave passed in Washington State and get breastfeeding concessions passed by Delta Airlines, a lot of issues that really matter to women around the country. So this is what we've had right now. This is what we've been doing. But a lot of it is really top-down. You know, we work, we have developers, and we decide, you know, we listen to what the community needs, but a lot of this is we try to figure out how can we build a better tool for organizations to use. What we recognize we really need to do, and what's coming next, if you can switch to the next slide, is giving people the ability to build their own tools. We pride ourselves in building on top of an open architecture, but we want to go one step further, and we're basically building something that we call Salsa Commons. It's kind of a little bit like the App Store that Apple provides now for iPhones, where organization or vendors or anybody who has an idea like, yeah, sure, I love what you guys provide, or maybe I don't, and I want to sort of leverage your email blasting tool, but take a slightly different crack at it and provide people with a different way to do online organizing. They can build a new application on top of our platform and then just and leverage all the things that we have, and then provide it either free, or we're going to build a small pricing model in, so that we can really build off the innovation that the internet is so good at. So that's a little bit of what we're doing and a little bit of who we are, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this today, and I look forward to answering questions from people later on. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We'll now look and turn it over from sort of the breadth, the big picture, to the depth, the on-the-ground experience. And Greg Bloom, who works with the group Beyond Bread, it's a progressive blog that's looking at a whole variety of different issues facing the poor and marginalized here in the United States. And I think it helps drive home the reasons why we're doing this work. And I hope that he will share some of his experiences. He has worked with Equal Justice USA, doing anti-death penalty work, and now he is working here inside the Beltway, but not on policy, on-the-ground changes to people's reality. So please welcome Greg Bloom.
I feel really sheepish coming up here to speak after Democracy in Action and the Sunlight Foundation, because they're doing really incredible things, and we are just getting started. I don't have real experience to share with y'all in terms of what works. We're trying to figure out what works, so maybe I can shed some light on as I forget his name. We are a service organization actually called Bread for the City, and we have 4 programs: food, clothing. Well, clothing isn't quite a program. Food, medical care for underinsured and uninsured DC residents, and social services, as well as food, medical, social services, and what's the other one? No. We work with people who are on the verge of being homeless. The average income is $7,000 a year. These are people who need to struggle to put food on their tables, who don't get very much medical attention. And we have a health clinic, and we have social services. And the problem is there's a digital divide that isn't as, we're not all as aware of. That's between people who might have access but don't have time. Our staff is very busy, and we have 60 people who are helping people day in, day out, and they want to provide an outlet for advocacy. But unfortunately, we haven't had ever the time or the capacity, and they're trying to change that now. Now, we have a new blog that is about 4 months old. It's called Beyond Bread. It's run primarily by a very enthusiastic staff member. You probably have a few of them in your own organizations. This person sort of does it by the love of the organization and by the hope and the promise of the internet. But so far, they have not really found a way to connect with what it is that we're doing on the ground and what it is that we can do in the web. What can we add to the discussion? And if you go to like the July archives. If you go down, they're blogging about, down there. So like in the past when they started blogging, it was trying to talk about what's going wrong in the city. What is it about policy in the city that makes it so that people who need housing can't acquire it? What's the problem when affordable housing is defined as between $40,000 and $90,000 of income a year? And but instead of talking about it, instead of doing what a normal blog does, which, normal, in terms of linking to other bloggers and so on and so forth, they were prompting people to talk about their experience in working in service, and they were asking people to share a little bit about what they thought was so important that would change. So you got a lot of posts that were like 3,500 words long, and they'd be like, we need to do this. We need to make sure that the people who don't have the resources to defend themselves in landlord-tenant court, we need to make sure that they have access to free legal advice or that sort of thing. But it was very, very, it was basically a think tank blog produced by a service organization. And you can understand how this happens, right? They want to participate in a conversation. They understand what it is that's wrong with the city in so many different ways. And when you give them a platform, when you build the blog, unfortunately, and people don't necessarily understand how the internet works, so they're just going to speak what they know. Nathan was consulting with us early on in the development phase of this blog, and he encouraged us to share the voices throughout the organization, to talk to the different people who were doing the work, and to get their opinions and to circle through. And that was very good advice. But when you circle through, you don't really have a clear reason for existing. People were basically writing essays instead of providing a service to the community. Now, we happen to be located within one of the bloggiest communities in the country. Shaw, which is where our office is, there are so many bloggers there, and they understand policy, and they understand what's happening in the city. They don't focus on what's happening to low-income residents because that's out of their purview. But if we were talking about what's happening to the low-income residents in a way that's concrete, that's not an essay, in a way that engages with what's happening in the city, what's happening in the government, and makes it so that we can provide a link to something and say, this is happening, this policy change is being recommended by Mayor Fenty. Here's how we know it will affect your neighbors. People will start linking to it. And as we've already seen, once we start getting more concrete, we put up a post about a homeless shelter in downtown DC that's being closed by Fenty. Mayor Fenty has his reasons, and we support some of those reasons, and the way it's happening could potentially leave hundreds of people out on the street. So we provide a voice in the blogosphere where before there were just emails that would circulate around. And once we provided that voice, DCist, which is one of the big blogs in the city, they linked to us, and we got our biggest traffic that we'd ever gotten. Up until that point, it had been 10 or 12 people reading a day, and for a couple of days, we had a couple hundred people. This is a small step forward, and we don't necessarily know where it is that we're going to go from here. But my point being, in your organizations, you have to figure out concrete information that you have access to and that you can spread to other people. And you want to advocate, and that's great, but you don't just want to get out there and howl in the wilderness. You want to provide a service to the people who are coming to your block.
Thank you so much. I met our next speaker first when he was a reporter, I believe, and had tracked me down to the wilds of central Illinois to interview me for a piece he was doing. He's now, in many ways, conducting investigative reporting writ large, making available data that just simply does not exist in the public domain anywhere else on what is going on with our broadband here in the United States. So please welcome Drew Clark to talk more about that. Hopefully he'll mention his event coming up in but a few days this Friday. And please welcome him.
Thanks very much, Sasha. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be a part of OneWeb Week because of the great energy that is involved from all of these people on this panel and from Congresswoman Edwards and Commissioner Adelstein. And I also particularly want to thank Nathaniel James and Morgan Wayland for the great leadership they showed in organizing DC OneWebDay, and also Susan Crawford for creating this. So I have three quick takeaway messages for you about broadbandcensus.com and why we're here celebrating OneWeb Week. The first has to do with what should you do on OneWebDay or OneWeb Week? Well, you should take the broadband census. You should find out what your internet options are and take a speed test so that you'll be able to compare your actual internet speeds against that which your provider promises. And what we're doing here, of course, is creating, as Sasha mentioned, a publicly available database of broadband availability and also broadband competition, broadband speeds, broadband service quality, broadband prices. The second thing I want to mention is what Sasha referred to, and the reason I say OneWeb Week. We have coming up on Friday, the September 26th, a conference. It's being sponsored by Carnegie Mellon University, University of Texas, Virginia Tech, and BroadbandCensus.com. It's the top link there on the Broadband Census for America conference. We invite all of you to register and attend. Attendance is free for members of the press and for members of Congress and staff and anyone affiliated with a university or educational institution. We are trying to create a dialogue here, and we have a great diversity of people speaking. We have officials from Public Knowledge, from Connected Nation, from Communications Workers of America. We have academics from Virginia Tech, MIT, University of Texas, chief economist from the National Telecommunications and Information Agency, as well as many, many state officials like Rochelle Chong of the PUC in California, and Larry Landis of the Indiana PUC. They'll all be speaking about how and why a broadband census should be conducted so that there is publicly available information about the state of our broadband. So this is the public forum that we're trying to create to discuss these issues so that consumers can be better informed about their options. And the third message I have is about understanding what works on a state and local level as far as broadband goes. We've begun a series of state-by-state articles about the broadband deployment and broadband data in each of the states. We've gotten through about a third of the states. Again, on this link here, you just keep scrolling down if you don't mind. You'll come to the collection of articles that we've published so far about broadband census in the states. Drew Bennett, who is here, has written many of them, as have a couple other people. And on each of these articles, go ahead and click on one of those. How about the Maryland one, if you don't mind, number 12. So what the reporters who are writing these stories are doing is going and investigating what are the biggest issues in that state in terms of broadband deployment. But the reason I wanted to call this to your attention is if you scroll down to the bottom of this Broadband Census Maryland piece, you'll see, of course, lists of previous articles, but resources. And what we're trying to do is assemble in one place a collection of information about the cases, the documents, the resources that are available. In the near future, this will actually be a wiki page that anyone will be able to add information to. You can already add a comment to any page on broadbandcensus.com, but soon it'll be fully wikiable so that the community of Internet users can be adding to this knowledge base. So, in conclusion, we have a couple flyers out here for you. What is broadbandcensus.com? I've tried to walk you through some of the things we do. We are a free resource of this kind of information. We believe that it's important that there is publicly available information about not just availability, but also competition. And the only way you can get at that is by knowing which carriers are where. Congresswoman Edwards spoke about how in her area, her zip code has some broadband service, but there's some degree of variation. A zip code isn't the most reliable unit, and we agree completely. And that's one of the reasons we've been urging the Federal Communications Commission, when they go to a more finely grained level of data to the census block or census tract, we've been urging them to release the publicly available information about the names of the carriers who are offering broadband service in those areas so that consumers can actually see who the carriers are and have something to compare it against. Why broadband census? All political issues of our day that involve technology, communication, media, involve broadband. And unless there's universal broadband, there's going to be a certain set of people who are left out of this dialogue in our country. We think that most people agree that as political issues depend on broadband, broadband depends on broadband data. We are trying to provide that data for free in a publicly available way so that everyone can use the data for whatever purpose that they so desire. And I'm certainly open to dialogue with any and each and every one of you. We want to make broadbandcensus.com a place that you can find information that's useful and that is reliable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Drew. Our next speaker is Alec Ross. He wears many hats, some of which are so gigantic that he can only wear one at a time. So while he is a founder of One Economy, he is here today solely in his capacity as an advisor for Senator Obama over technology, media, and telecommunications policy. I will also note that we did invite McCain's folks to show up as well, and they were unable to make it. So with that said, let's open it up to Alec to talk about what are potential futures here in the United States.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And well, if you like what you've heard so far, then I've got a presidential candidate for you. In all seriousness, I want to, instead of espousing policy that y'all can read on the web, and that given the audience you've probably read before, I wanted to give you a sense of my own personal experience with Senator Obama and tie it to some of what the panelists here have mentioned so far. I got my professional start after college 15, 16 years ago, and I was in Teach for America, and I taught 6th and 7th graders in West Baltimore. It's one of the lowest income and most violent communities in the United States. And my first year of teaching, I was completely ill-equipped to be teaching. You know, I had about a month of student teaching, and they sort of threw me into this classroom, a classroom that was much smaller than this room, and which had about 3 times as many people in it. And the one time throughout my first year of teaching when I knew those young people would behave is when we marched them into the computer lab. It was the one time during the week where I knew I could have 1 hour of peace. And I eventually got to be a better teacher. But one of the things that stuck with me was that they were so good in the computer lab because there was so much offered to them that spoke to them directly. And I think that the internet experience, the computing experience for so many people is a very personal one. It allows people to find the information that they want. It allows people to perform business or communications transactions without the limitations of historical, of place and space. And one of the things that I took away from my years in the classroom was that it didn't matter that these young people were very low income, and it didn't matter that these young people were not performing at grade level when I got them. But there was something that I witnessed that I believe more strongly today than ever, which is that there's something very special about this generation of young people when it comes to the use of technology. It's very, very intuitive to them. And I think that there's great consequence to this dynamic. And since I started teaching in the early 1990s, we've witnessed these enormous changes in the economy. We're making this big change from what was once an industrial and manufacturing-based economy into one that's increasingly technology-rich and knowledge-based. And what's happened is that, particularly in low-income and working-class communities, the access to and effective use of technology has become this incredible predictor of whether people can make it economically in the 21st century. Where in working class or low income communities, at one point in your life you could have gotten a job at a factory or at a mill or at a port based on the strength of your shoulders. Those jobs simply don't exist anymore in an increasingly frictionless global economy. And what's happened is we've had this economy that's sort of lumped into two. On the one hand, we have knowledge workers who use technology very effectively, and on the other hand, we have service industry workers. And I think that there's great consequence to the choices that we make about pushing technology into our working class communities, ensuring that our young people have the skills to use them. Because what we don't want is a workforce of the future that looks like one that's reflective of the communities that people grew up in. It shouldn't be a predictor. And one of the things that I saw, again, from my time in the classroom is that young people do have the skills to use technology and then compete and succeed in the 21st century economy. And that simple fact led me directly to Barack Obama. My first exposure to Senator Obama was when he was a then state senator in the south side of Chicago. And it was fascinating in the city of Chicago. And what was fascinating was that he was speaking. He was talking like Thomas Friedman's "The World Is Flat" before the book was read, and he was saying it in front of audiences where they weren't used to hearing that kind of talk, particularly from somebody who was a state senator. And that stuck with me then. It stuck with me when he decided to run for United States Senate. It stuck with me throughout his tenure in the Senate, where he's continued to be at the forefront of issues of technology, media, and telecommunications. And it stuck to me certainly during this campaign where he won, I won't say entirely, but with a big assist from technology. We all know about the role that the internet played in helping him raise money. But lesser known are the tools that he and his staff made a choice to invest in that empowered people who are historically outside of the political process. So if you think back to the caucus states, the caucus states were the places where Senator Obama really ran off a string of victories against Senator Clinton. A lot of the success of that is because people who were in smaller states that didn't necessarily have field staff, were able to self-organize using the technology platforms of the Obama campaign. And you see it with the actual policies now of the campaign itself. His technology and innovation agenda really gets into a rather extraordinary level of detail. And for somebody like me who thinks that we should be dealing with these issues beyond the soundbite, that's incredibly gratifying. And I hope that those of you who do care about technology and innovation as it relates to federal government, you do go to his website, you do read that agenda, because there's a lot of specificity there and specifics that I think go to the heart of what it's going to take to revitalize our community. Very briefly, he calls for comprehensive universal service fund reform to change a $7 billion program from one that supports telephony to one that supports unleashing broadband and being able to empower the programs the likes of which we heard about today. He calls for spectrum reform so that we can maximize the use of our nation's spectrum, and he calls for the creation of our country's first chief technology officer so that technology can have a seat at the leadership table in Washington. And then the last thing that I want to say, and the last thing that I want to point to, is the power that technology can play in helping to create open government. It can open up government processes and dialogues. It can open up government data, and with a willing administration, the kinds of efforts that Ellen Miller referenced and the kind of leadership that she has shown can now have a partner in the federal government. So I feel very privileged from being able to sit on this panel today. And the one thing that I can say on behalf of the Obama campaign, having listened to it, is we agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. And to bring things home is one of the OneWebDay coordinators, Nathan James. He will talk a little bit about, I believe, the Time Capsule, correct? Yes, wonderful. Which is a pretty innovative project. I think it's the only one we've done for OneWebDay ever in its 3-year history. But it's a great little device for documenting what's happening in the here and now, given that I think these issues will be with us for a while and of growing import in coming years. So let me turn it over to Nathan to explain the time capsule and maybe wax philosophical for a moment on why you did such a thing as organize OneWebDay here in D.C.
Thanks a lot, Sasha. Yeah, it's a great lineup to have to close on. Thank you, everyone. This has been great. My name is Nathan James. I'm with the Media and Democracy Coalition, which is a collaborative organization that brings together about 24 core organizations and many, many allies to elevate the public's voice in media and telecommunications policymaking. And so that's the soundbite on that, but it's not very exciting. You wonder, why does the public need to have a voice in media and telecommunications policymaking? And I think that when I found out about OneWebDay, I said, okay, this is a public education platform where we can really talk about why people should care about and be involved in making, sort of struggling with these sometimes challenging and abstract ideas, communication policy. So I got to know Susan Crawford a few months ago. She went to the National Conference for Media Reform, and I spent some time with her there. And I called her 2 months ago, and I said, so who's running the DC OneWebDay? And she said, well, we've got an interesting list of people who want to be involved, but can you do it? So I spent some of my time at the coalition doing it and otherwise, and brought together a great group of people from the American University Center for Social Media, Sunlight Foundation, CCIA, which is the Computer and Communications Industry Association, which has been bringing an industry voice, especially around the issue of net neutrality on a pro-net neutrality, pro-internet freedom side. New America Foundation, we have the Media and Democracy Fund has been involved. I'm probably missing a couple. Broadband Census, of course, Center for Democracy and Technology. PBS Engage, Public Knowledge. I mean, everybody just sort of came out of the woodwork and said, let's make something happen. So we got on the phone and we said, what can we do? And I know Laura Hertzfeld from PBS said, well, why don't we make a time capsule? And we said, okay. And I think what we really liked about it is it really grappled with the question of time and of history. And we heard from both Congresswoman Edwards and also from Jonathan Adelstein at the Commission that we know that these things are moving so quickly. And I liked what Commissioner Adelstein said. It's like trying to take a still picture of a speeding bullet. And I think in some ways that's what the time capsule is. It's meant to be a snapshot of where we stand in this new move, this new chapter in our history and this democratic experiment, that we have a massive, open, decentralized communication platform to really get in there and help people get involved. So I was wondering, can you play the video of the time capsule? It kind of starts off and shows how it works. We used WordPress. We just wanted a very open publishing format. We were able to break it a little bit so that you don't actually need to even have a user account. So we wanted to have a super low barrier publishing platform, so you don't have to go back to your email and back and forth. And you can see the video sort of walks you through what people have been doing for the last month to make contributions to the Time Capsule. Very basic. They choose 4 categories, and they go through and they enter and publish. It's been moderated, just to be careful about spam. And what we found in the last month, we're up to about 85 posts from all over the world, even as far as Australia. I think I saw one coming through from India. And it's basically an opportunity to say, this is one thing that I love about how the internet makes me an empowered citizen. I use this tool to organize. This blogger has helped me connect to complicated things going on in, say, Guantanamo Bay. We've got wonderful, the content has been extremely high quality. And on OneWebDay, we're going to be shutting it down. And we decided that we wanted, we said, do you bury a virtual time capsule? And we decided not to. So we're actually sort of jiggering with the idea of a time capsule. It will remain open, but you can't contribute to it anymore after 5 p.m. today. However, anyone interested, students, researchers can take a look at it, open it up. We're actually going to leave the comment faculties open, so you can, over the years, it'll be a living archive of sort of where we were in the state of e-democracy and political participation online until September 22nd, 2008. And so this is to give you some idea of the content that's come through. And yeah, so that's basically, that's it. And so anybody who, if you're watching online and you still want to go, it's timecapsule.onewebday.org. We're going to close it down, like I said, for contributions at 5 p.m. tonight. Some other announcements to make. In talking to Susan, what we decided to do is that we'll come together on OneWebDay 2020 to have a reopening and a reinvestigation of where we stand in 12 years from now. Have we brought more people online? Have we figured out how to keep the internet open and free and a platform that everyone can use? And did the tools get better, or do we still have sort of a technical elite that's using them, or have we found a way to connect the grassroots to the netroots? There's a lot of questions that we have, and we don't know where we're going to be. We don't know what the internet will look like in 12 years. So we'll be coming back. It's going to be the 15th OneWebDay. It'll be in another election year, so the question of political participation will hopefully be a live one. And it'll be just enough we'll be just far enough out that the sort of policy decisions that we've heard about today, some of them will have been made, and the internet that will follow from those rulemakings and those laws and those policies will be a fact at that time. And I think it'll be, if things go horribly wrong, I think it'll be just enough time to get in there and fix it, and so we can come back again and make sure that we've outlined a trajectory, and we want to come back in 12 years and make sure that we're following through on that trajectory, and that it's a constantly moving, forward-moving, progressive thing. I think that's about it. I just wanted to, one more thing that we're going to be doing, and anyone here, if you're interested, you can talk to me or to Morgan, our core coordinator there in the back. We're going to be loading up an offline version. We decided it's important to create an offline version of the capsule onto USB drives, and sending them out. We're going to be looking for the next 3 months for archiving partners who can help us sort of collect everything in a version, because we want to say, well, what if the internet really is broken in 12 years? And if the only place that you can find the time capsule is online, that's a problem. So if anyone here is interested in receiving that, we'll be mailing those out in the next couple of weeks on USB drives. That'll be a really nice thing to have. And the best to get your address on a sign-up sheet, which I think has been going around. And if you know anyone at archiving institutions, historians, educators, librarians, anyone like that who would be interested in collecting that and working with us to sort of distribute the work of maintaining and archiving the data that's come through in the project, that'd be great. Also tonight at 6 o'clock, one of our sponsors is Tris Cafe, and they're having a happy hour from us from 6 to 8. It's in Adams Morgan. It's on 18th. There's a flyer. Everyone here is welcome to come. It's a more relaxed environment, and we can celebrate OneWebDay that way as well. And maybe I'm hoping sort of set up the foundation for people who might want to work on the next DC OneWebDay. And I think that's about it. I want to thank everybody, this wonderful panel, and all of our sponsors who I just listed off at the beginning. So I'll save some time for Q&A. Yeah, great.
So we've got enough time for a few questions for our panelists here, and you should feel free to just raise your hand, and I'll call on you. I also, want to reiterate what Nathan said, which is, OneWebDay is really about education, but it's also about a celebration. So it's about, what we've done thus far that should be enjoyed, as well as what we still need to do in the future. And certainly, if folks want to join us this evening at Trist, I think it's on 18th Street, I believe. Certainly, it'd be great to have some conversations over a few pints, just like I did with Susan several years ago that got me involved in this to begin with. So I'm looking forward to that very much, and certainly will be there. So who has questions for our panelists? And if you could just be very brief. Right back here.
Mike Nelson with Georgetown University. When I worked at the White House and the FCC, we had wonderful ways to communicate with our constituents, and we got lots of email telling us what to do. Sorting through 300,000 emails, which was a typical number on an FCC proceeding, is not easy. When we go forward with the next generation of e-democracy, does anybody on the panel have ways to really apply a fair filter and not use what we have today, which is basically who has more money and who can buy bigger ads?
Sure. So the question for the online audience is, what does one do with the information overload that's concomitant with having information access?
We can talk a little bit about that. We've been involved.
Thank you, the mic.
Okay. We've been involved a bit with a project that the Congressional Management Foundation has been working on, trying to bring together several different players in this issue, speaking from the sort of legislative advocacy perspective, although certainly the administration is another perspective, to try to deal with the fact you've got the interests of the elected officials, you've got the advocacy community, you've got citizens, you've got the vendors that provide tools, and we all have competing interests, but we all have a role to play. And one thing that they're working on is trying to set up, right now from our perspective, the issue we have is we have to kind of force messages through web forms that are really set up for individual one-off messages from a person to an elected official. But the problem is the First Amendment gives you a right to organize, to petition the government, not just do it individually. So we're trying to provide the opportunity for that organization, but the infrastructure right now only allows for really one message at a time. So what really needs to happen is to bring groups together and for the recipients of this message to say, is there ways that we can maybe through an open API or through another format provide a way for messages to be delivered en masse, to be topic coded and to be organized at the point that they come in. So it isn't just sort of vendors trying to game the system and force a message that's really designed for individual messages. The risk, though, and I know that's been something that the CMF group has been dealing with, is how do you do that in a way that's actually open and isn't just the big pockets, the larger vendors who want to make this system work well for them. How do you make sure that they don't dominate?
You might keep your eye on a site in Washington State called Public Knowledge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. This is an individual internet entrepreneur activist who is actually working with legislators in Washington State collaboratively to figure out how to get messages in, how to sort messages, and it's a process that starts from providing information about legislation, engaging citizens in understanding that knowledge, and then communicating back to members of Congress. And we think this site is, has a lot of potential, on the national scale.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to respond to that?
He's making you Google knowledge is power.
Other questions from the audience? I think we got time for another one or two. Yes, sir.
So I've noticed a lot of the organizations actively involved in these kind of things are not-for-profit, generally speaking. How can for-profit or profit-driven corporations be actively involved? Or what are some good ways to contribute?
Right. So the question is, along with the nonprofits that are involved, how can for-profit organizations be involved? Drew?
Yeah, Drew Clark, Broadband Census. We actually are organized as a limited liability company. So, from my end, I think that what we're trying to do with broadbandcensus.com is create a public and open source of information that can build a self-sustaining model that provides useful information for individuals. I mean, I think that we see CCIA is here. They're represented by for-profit companies as well. They have a strong interest in the internet and making sure the internet is open. I see officials from Verizon are here too. They're for-profit, and they certainly want to provide communication services, but also make money. I think that I don't mean to be flippant. I think that you're asking a good question. I just think that just as with journalism, coming from journalism background, you see the traditional business model of the daily newspaper failing, and so people are searching for alternatives. One of those alternatives that I had the opportunity to be involved in was the nonprofit model, where you're a nonprofit organization, you're doing journalism, investigative journalism, you receive funding from foundations, and put your work out there. And I think that really we're in a kind of a let 1,000 flowers bloom moment where there's going to be a lot of innovation and exploration in business models as well as organizational structures.
Anyone else want to speak to that? All right, last question. A quiet audience today. No? All right, well, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for those that spoke and provided expertise and insight. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll see you all this evening for a pint. Thanks, everyone.